Good evening. My name is Jimmy Capples, though legally you might know me as James Capples. Dr. Corman, I want to thank you for working with me throughout this project. You've shown immense patience and guidance, and so I wouldn't be able to get this done without you. So why don't we jump right in? Defining discipline, the role of the Dean of Students in the San Francisco Unified School District. So quick background. I got into teaching years ago. I was a math teacher. And my last year teaching math was the year when everything was shut down due to COVID. And I realized when I went to at-home learning that I didn't care to speak about numbers enough to do it into a tiny computer microphone and camera for my students. So I figured that's a disservice to the students, but I love working with them. Where can I go from here? So I decided to start this Masters of Counseling program with the PPSC, and I was able to get hired on an intern credential basis at Lowell High School up in San Francisco. Now, as an internship, I still had 300, 400 caseload, 400 student caseload. And it was quite a challenge, but I guess I did a well enough job because an assistant principal at a different school in the district recruited me to come be their dean of students. She gave me a call and said, we need a dean. I think you would be great for it. She was the one who hired me at Lowell. She had moved schools. And I said, well, I'm still learning how to be a counselor, but I'm kind of sick of changing schedules. Let's go for this new challenge. And so I jumped right in. She said, go apply. The listing is under head counselor, but it's not a head counselor position, which I thought was weird. And that's sort of the background to this project. So I filled out the head counselor application and they offered me the job, and I wanted to see what I was getting myself into since there was no job listed for dean. It was head counselor. So I got in touch with a woman who was the dean of students at the last school I taught at. And she told me that the position of dean doesn't exist in that school district anymore. She had gotten more responsibilities, a small pay raise, and was promoted to the title of assistant principal. There was no more deans in that school district. So I'm wondering, well, what am I getting myself into in this mystery role in San Francisco? So yeah, as I stated, COVID-19 shut down my school. And then in those 2 years off, high schools were set up with immense challenges with the students coming back. Social emotional challenges. How do they deal with being away from home? How do they deal with being surrounded by students if they're introverted? How do they stay focused if they're extroverted now that there's friends around? There were maturity issues. I believe that the last 2 years, 7th and 8th grade, are major maturation steps in becoming a young adult. Before you could be a high schooler, you need that little responsibility of, I'm the big kid on campus, I got to do the right thing. Kids coming into high school after COVID didn't get those years. And then just undeveloped student skills. How do I behave in the classroom? How do I time manage to make sure I get all my notes taken and I get all my homework done? They haven't had time to practice this. And so they're being thrown into the more challenging world of high school without having mastered those skills in middle school. And on that note, as a dean of students, I'm in charge of safety and discipline. With these issues of the students coming back, those throw wrinkles into discipline and safety on campus. Like I said, there was no job description. And so it's very possible that different schools will need different responsibilities for their dean. At Lowell, there was one dean for 3,000 students, but it's an incredibly competitive school academically. There's not a lot of discipline. The school I'm at now has 2 deans for just under 2,000 students because there's a lot more low-income families, a lot more kids who struggle academically. And then there's always the problem of budget cuts and position consolidation, like what happened in my last school district. They got rid of the dean job and just moved the responsibilities of an assistant principal to the dean they already had. So the purpose of doing this research is to figure out how I can be an effective dean. I need to know what I got to do because they didn't give me a job description and there was no listing for it on the job boards. I need to know how what I do is different than what discipline the assistant principals and the principal handle if it is different. And since, administration deals with most of the discipline and there was no job description for my role of dean, is this position even needed? How much job security is there in this role? Knowing that they haven't even set up expectations for it. My research questions were: how are deans utilized in the San Francisco Unified School District? How is discipline filtered from the dean level compared to the AP? Are there some things that go straight to administration and avoid us altogether? And do deans and assistant principals handle the same disciplinary issues? So, context of the study and the definition of terms. The two parts of the context I found were improving institutions for everyone to effectively do their job. It's best that they know what they're doing. Clear and defined roles are essential for success. And so my hope is that in this study, I can find some clear and defined roles so that I can do my job as best as I can. And then the other role, the other part of context is developing professions. There's a lot of overturn in the San Francisco Unified School District administration. As I mentioned, at the school I originally was counseling at, the assistant principal there who hired me got moved to a different school. And that's why she, mid-school year, and that's why she recruited me. Finishing out that year, our principal left and two of our assistant principals left to take principal jobs that had opened up elsewhere in the district. So that means they brought in two new assistant principals. The school I'm at now has a brand new principal this year. The woman who originally hired me at my current school left before the school year started. And so they brought up an elementary school principal to take over. He's doing a great job, but this almost revolving door of administrators means that deans should have a good sense of what's going on in administration because they're just one small step below. And this is a position where I could potentially move into administration if I want to. A couple terms to define the district. It's a collection of schools in close proximity managed by one central office. Dean of Students, or Dean, is a position on school campuses that manages disciplinary issues. SFUSD is the San Francisco Unified School District. DOE is the Department of Education. Now, literature review. There's not a ton on deans, at least not that came through in the past 10, 15 years. But what I did find that was helpful was the idea of extrinsic motivation used as a tool for better behavior. Now, there are some students who academically, they strive for greatness. It's intrinsically part of who they are and what they want to do, and that's great. The majority of high school students don't work like that. They don't see as much value in working really hard to just for the sake of being excellent. And so extrinsic motivators work really well. You could think of it as the old carrot and the stick analogy. If you want to move a horse, you can either dangle a nice carrot in front of its face to get it walking, or you could smack its hind legs with a stick to sort of scare it. Either way, you're getting the horse moving the way you want it to go. Lincoln High School down in Southern California ran a program called Think Gold, in which they set up a reward system for students who improved on their standardized tests from one year to the next. And the better they improved, the more rewards they got. Letters home, small medals, pictures of them hanging up in the hallways. And a lot of kids bought into it thinking, I want to tell people that I'm Think Gold level 2, I'm Think Gold level 3. And they say a lot of students who previously got meh scores went higher. Now, they weren't intrinsically motivated to work on these because, I mean, let's be honest, those scores really don't make a difference to the students at all. But when there's rewards with it, all of a sudden they became more motivated to do better. Another article I read was talking about how strict and fair rule enforcement gives kids boundaries and makes them feel safe because they know what's expected of them and everyone holds them accountable. But what goes along with that is making sure the students have a strong support system. So what that looks like on my school is, are the teachers able to have conversations with the students, build relationships with the parents? Are our counselors in constant conversation with their students, checking up on them? We have a wellness department with a couple social workers in there, and they're working with kids who have a little bit more trauma, who maybe need some guidance or need a place to cool off and vent. And the whole point is, when kids feel safe and when kids feel cared for, they're less likely to act out. Now, in my plan, well, I was going to go through every job board for education jobs I could find, like EdJoin, SFUSD's job board, Indeed, LinkedIn. I don't know if Monster is still a thing. I couldn't find anything on there, but search for job boards, looking for job listings for assistant principals, head counselors, deans, anything related to me and related to discipline. I also went through, found United States Ed Code, California Ed Code, and discipline rules for San Francisco Unified School District from their student handbook. Seeing as how head counselor and dean are considered similar in this district, I went to ASCA, the American Society or American School Counselors Association, to what do they have to say about discipline. And because there was so much of this standardized documents, which is what I was looking for, there were no human participants, so no ethical risks. Every mention of discipline in the job postings, the job descriptions, the Ed Code, of which there's a lot, and the ASCA, the School Counselor Association recommendations for counselors, will be recorded, put into a T-chart, and then separated by responsibilities for deans or head counselors and administrators. It ended up looking like this. Now, administrators on the right side, assistant principal, assistant principals will assist the principal in management and supervision of school. They need to know restorative justice practices and models. They need knowledge in response to intervention and instruction, restorative justice practice, and all decisions for suspension and expulsion come through the principal. On the left side, deans and head counselors, again, they were grouped together because that's how the district describes them. If you look, there's little asterisks at every single thing. And that is to show that none of these things relate to discipline. Now, the very bottom one, Ed Code 48.910, teachers may suspend students from their class. This is the only mention that could have something to do with deans. For an in-school suspension, they are to report the suspension to the principal or to a designee of the principal. If the principal decides that the deans should receive those calls, then that could be the dean. Dean is not specified, but there's potential there. So the dean position is never mentioned in the California Ed Code, the Federal Ed Code, School District Ed Code, and Handbook. The principal always has the final say unless a designee is named. And the only job descriptions in SFUSD is for the head counselor, which has nothing to do with discipline. There is no dean of students job description. The position of dean is combined with the head counselor. And so because of this, each school can use the dean for their own needs. As I mentioned, my school has an at-risk population. We have 2 deans for 1,900 students. The school I was at last year has 1 dean for 3,000. Just because of the nature of the campus, they have different needs, and there's no specificity on what a dean is supposed to do. There is no job description. There's no specific dean listing. There's no mention in Ed Code, and everything officially runs through the admin team. I say officially because if they want to designate some things for the dean, they have that flexibility. But if it's a suspension or an expulsion, everything goes through the principal. Now, there is an issue with not having a specific job description, and that's the potential for the boundaries of what can be asked are unclear. Where a teacher cannot be asked to supervise a certain number of dances or games a year because normally administrators have to do that, deans can be asked. There's nothing in their job description saying not to. If deans are needed to stay late, attend extra meetings, or substitute classes, they can do that because it's not in their job description to do or to not do that. So what does this mean going forward? Let me move this. In my practice, I think there has to be a job description made. I went into this job pretty blind. I was told I'll do discipline and that's it. Specifics of what that means, non-existent. If I didn't have a co-dean that I'm working with every day with nearly a decade of experience, I'd be pretty lost. What do I do here? What do I do here? How do I handle this? Where are the forms for that? How do I talk to parents? There's a lot I don't know. There's no training. There's no job description, but I'm lucky I have an experienced person to work with. However, that lack of definition does give freedom to observe the school's needs and handle responsibilities creatively. So instead of just being a disciplined person, waiting for kids to come and tell me their problems, I get to wander the halls sort of like a hall monitor. I get to check in with teachers who have sent me emails regarding students. I get to hold meetings with teachers and counselors and explain to them a lot of the discipline world that they don't know. And that's garnered a lot of trust and well-being on campus because teachers feel heard and they're a little bit more in the know of the world of discipline, which they have no experience with. I've got to go down to local shopping centers and stores and build relationships with security teams at the shopping centers and the owners of stores. We have some federal land next to us, so I've got to meet military personnel who are just around the corner. I get to build relationships there, which is important because our school has off-campus lunch and kids like to hang out in those locations. I've become a master of our school's old but necessary security camera system. I've taken, gone all over the campus with some workers, replaced cameras to make our campus safer. And these are things that likely wouldn't have shown up in a job description. So I'm very fortunate in the flexibility for that. Going forward with research, though, some things I would like to explore potentially are how effective discipline from school districts with deans is compared to school districts that have eliminated or never had that position. Is there benefit to having a dean who only does discipline on campus, which somewhat frees up administrators to focus on other areas that need their attention? And the other thing, do students or staff feel better having a dean, a specific discipline person on campus? Maybe that way they know that there's a person looking out, scanning, watching things, dealing with students, and not having their attention pulled elsewhere. Do they feel safer? Do they feel more at ease? Do they feel like that person's more accessible since they're not an administrator? Maybe it's more of an even playing field between the two of them. They feel more comfortable talking with them. I don't know. But if there's potential for a school to just feel and operate better by having that position of dean on campus, that could be useful information. So, Mr. Corbin, this concludes my presentation. Again, thank you so much for all the help you've given me and the patience. I hope this video finds you well. Thanks again. Take care.